This is Travis Wayne Goodsell, and I'm redoing the ERA video. This is the ERA website, equalrightsamendment.org, and we'll not show you the ratifications and the non-ratifications. We'll go right to the explanation of it. The Equal Rights Amendment was passed by Congress on the 22nd of March, 1972, and sent to the states for ratification in order to be added to the Constitution. It needed approval by legislatures in 3/4, 38, of the 50 states. By 1977, the legislatures of 35 states had approved the amendment. In 1978, Congress voted to extend the original March 1979 deadline to 30th of June 1982. However, no additional states voted yes before the date, and the ERA fell three states short of ratification. The 15 states that did not ratify the Equal Rights Amendment before 1982 deadline were, and it includes Utah. Since formulation of the three-state strategy for ratification in 1994, the ERA bills have been introduced in subsequent years in one or more legislative sessions in 10 of the unratified states, Utah being included. Between 1985 and 2016, ERA ratification bills were released from committee in some states and were passed by one but not both houses of the legislature in two of them. In Illinois, the House but not the Senate passed an ERA ratification bill in 2003, while the Senate but not the House did so in 2014. In 5 of the 6 years between 2011 and 2016, the Virginia Senate passed a resolution ratifying the Equal Rights Amendment, but the House of Delegates never released a companion bill from committee for a full vote on the House floor. On March 22nd, 2017, 45 years to the day after Congress passed the ERA, Nevada became the 36th state to ratify it. On 30th of May 2018, Illinois became the 37th state. ERA bills have also been introduced in the legislatures, which include Utah. Okay. Five states have voted to rescind or otherwise withdraw their ratification of the ERA, which include Nebraska, Tennessee, Idaho, Kentucky, and South Dakota. They're trying to point out that you can't unratify a vote. Alrighty. Utah, there we go. Utah, not ratified. Okay, so apparently it's on the Wikipedia page. Okay. And we'll go over what the ERA is. It is a proposed amendment to the United States Constitution designed to guarantee equal legal rights for all American citizens, regardless of sex. It seeks to end the legal distinction between men and women in terms of divorce, property, employment, and other matters. The ERA was originally written by Alice Paul and Crystal Eastman. The amendment was introduced in Congress for the first time in 1921 and has prompted conversations about the meaning of legal equality for women and men ever since. In the early history of the Equal Rights Amendment, middle-class women were largely supportive, while those speaking for the working class were often opposed, pointing out that employed women needed special protections regarding working conditions and employment hours. With the rise of the women's movement in the United States during the 60s, the ERA garnered increasing support, and after being reintroduced by U.S. Representative Martha Griffiths, she was a Democrat of Michigan, in 1971, it was approved by the United States House of Representatives on October 12th of that year, and on the 22nd of March, 1972, it was approved by the United States Senate, thus submitting the ERA to the state legislatures for ratification, as outlined in Article 5 of the Constitution. Congress had originally set a ratification deadline of the 22nd of March, 1979, for the state legislatures to consider the ERA. Through 1977, the amendment received 35 of the necessary 38 state ratifications, with wide bipartisan support, including that of both major political parties, both houses of Congress, and Presidents Nixon, Ford, and Carter. The ERA seemed destined for ratification until Phyllis Schlafly mobilized conservative women in opposition. Mormons, are you aware that the state of Utah is dominantly conservative? So what you're seeing here is the reason why the state of Utah refused to ratify the ERA. It's because of conservative women. Actually, I can probably go to the church, but let's go to their argument first of all. These conservative women argued that the ERA would disadvantage housewives. Do you see what they're doing here? Disadvantaging housewives. Women were wanting equality because they believed that being a housewife was being held in bondage, that they were not free to go out and get a job and thus get paid as a man in the workplace. This is where it was understood that women belonged in the kitchen barefoot and pregnant. Housewives. This is slavery that these conservative women used as the argument not to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, to keep women in bondage. And they also didn't want to be drafted into the military and to lose protections such as alimony. Oh, there's the money factor. Isn't that interesting? And as a person who has been divorced, I have no sympathy, as I must give acknowledgement to my point of view and indicate that I have no sympathy for women who claim alimony after being the cause of divorce, and eliminate the tendency for mothers to obtain custody over their children in divorce cases. You see what's going on here? They want to keep women in slavery as housewives. They don't want to fight for our country, and they don't want to lose money, such as alimony. They don't want to have to go to work, get a job to support themselves. And now, yes, I understand you can't just go to any old store and get automatically hired to give you enough money to support yourself, let alone kids when they come over for visit, because custody should be shared by both parents, not sole custody by a mother, as was my argument for 10 years and was locked away for 6 years because I wanted my kids. So you see what they're doing there? They want inequality. That was the conservative position. Why the state of Utah refused to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. They wanted to keep women subjected to the authority of men. And remember, the church during this time still had the temple ceremony covenant. The first covenant of the priesthood was that women must obey. The word was obey their husband. And if they didn't obey their husband, they were obligated to kill themselves for violation of that covenant. If you don't understand that, then you're missing out on church history. All right, let's see if I can find something on the ERA and the LDS church. All right. Let's see, amoral. Yeah, First Presidency reaffirms opposition to ERA. LDS.org. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, that's the... Good thing it's going slow. All right, here's the First Presidency statement opposing the Equal Rights Amendment. We want to go to primary source documents rather than secondary source documents. So, good thing I found this and was able to click on it in the last second. All right, so this is by... Are you kidding me? What? Where's the... They're not cooperating. Because it's not stating who this is. It's December 1976. They didn't sign it. Okay, so I think it's Kimball. Wasn't he in 1976? Let's confirm. LDS Church Presidents. Oh, man. List. Yep, there we go. Okay, ordination is in the middle column. Spencer W. Kimball, December 30th, 1973. So it was him that did this First Presidency message. Spencer W. Kimball. First Presidency issues statement opposing Equal Rights Amendment. From its beginnings, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has affirmed the exalted role of woman in our society. So notice that. They claim the exalted role of women. But it's from its beginnings, which means Joseph Smith. Pay attention to this, because Brigham Young is the one who took away the exalted role of women. We'll get to that in a second. Well, maybe a couple minutes. In 1842, when women's organizations were little known, The prophet Joseph Smith established the women's organization of the church, the Relief Society, as a companion body of the priesthood. See what they said there? They acknowledge that women had the priesthood, a companion body of the priesthood. The church is acknowledging, through Spencer W. Kimball, that women had the priesthood. So remember that when we get to Brigham Young taking it away. The Relief Society continues to function today as a vibrant, worldwide organization aimed at strengthening motherhood and broadening women's learning and involvement in religious, compassionate, cultural, educational, and community pursuits, but not as a body, companion body of the priesthood. Notice this. Pay very close attention to the wording. In Utah, where our church is headquartered, women received the right to vote in 1870, 50 years before the 19th Amendment to the Constitution granting the right nationally. There have been injustices to women before the law. You'll also note that 1870 was around the time when the church was pressured to stop polygamy. 1890 specifically, and then again in 1904, I believe I remember from when I did my 3-video series on polygamy that Joseph Smith did not participate in and was set up. And so when you see 1870 that Utah women were given the right to vote, this was when the United States was pressuring the church in Utah territory to comply with monogamy laws. And so the church gave women the right to vote so that they can vote against monogamy. You gotta know the historical background, as I was taught in seminary with the scripture masteries. You gotta know the historical background. There have been injustices to women before the law, and in society generally. These we deplore. What about the temple? You were telling women to kill themselves if they didn't obey their husband. There are additional rights to which women are entitled. However, we firmly believe that the Equal Rights Amendment is not the answer. So they say that women need more rights, but that the Equal Rights Amendment that would guarantee women equal rights is not the answer. We just read what the Equal Rights Amendment consisted of. And we explained that it was conservative women who gave their argument that women needed to remain unequal as the counter-argument. While the motives of its supporters may be praiseworthy, here comes the flattery and pacification before they show their sexism. ERA as a blanket attempt to help women could indeed bring them far more restraints and repressions. We just went over it. The conservative argument was that they wanted restraints and repressions by remaining unequal. We fear, feelings, nothing more than feelings. It will even stifle many God-given feminine instincts, like being barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. Is that a feminine instinct? It would strike at the family, mankind's basic institution. So, the family unit was well understood back in this time. President Spencer W. Kimball also issued a family proclamation of his own during one of the conference talks. and it was forgotten, and Hinckley then came out with his own in 1995, released to the Relief Society in the precursor to General Conference. ERA would bring ambiguity, really, and possibly invite extensive litigation. Women might sue men. Unbelievable. Do you see what he's doing here? He's saying we men don't want to be sued by women who are being treated unequally. Passage of ERA, some legal authorities contend. I wonder who they're specifically referring to. Wouldn't be their church's own legal authorities. Could nullify the accumulated benefits to women in present statutes. Sort of like being barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, not receiving equal pay for equal work. For men being allowed to have custody of children. Do you see what they're doing here? This is the most blatant evil in public acknowledgement, because this was a statement. This was given to the church, and most likely was read over all of the churches on one particular Sunday after this was issued. We recognize men and women as equally important before the Lord. There you go. Did you catch that? Equally important before the Lord, not before the law. And here's their reason why. But with differences biologically. Oops. Emotionally. Oops. And in other ways that they don't want to reveal their further sexism on the issue. ERA, we believe, does not recognize these differences. Yeah, because they want to be treated equally. They don't want to be repressed, or restrained and repressed, to use his words previous. There are better means for giving men and women the rights they deserve. Yeah, it's in the Constitution. Everybody has the right to life, liberty, and property. See, this is a distraction. Shiny keys. Because while on the one hand, the church is saying we don't want equal rights for women, we want them kept restrained and repressed. Just like the contention was with the Phyllis argument. And what is not discussed here is that this was done as a fear-mongering for men. And that's the key that is revealed here as he's projecting when he says, we fear. It will even stifle many God-given feminine instincts. That's the projection of President Spencer W. Kimball, spokesman for the Lord of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We fear. And as a result, what they're saying is that they don't want men to have rights to children. That children belong with the mother. That is what my own mother told me as her justification for helping, aiding and abetting, shall we say, in my first wife, who's now my former wife, take our children away from me and flee to another country. Because the laws of the federal government and the laws of the state of Utah, in compliance with the federal law, not the Constitution, allow one spouse to take away the children from the other spouse, forcing the other spouse to pursue legal course to get his kids back or their kids back, which was denied to me here in the state of Utah. So having learned about this, and I've been telling you guys in several videos now that I wanted to get to this, that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is not led by Jesus. As Spencer W. Kimball acknowledged, Joseph Smith gave the priesthood to women. Right there. In 1842, when women's organizations were little known, the prophet Joseph Smith established the women's organization of the church, the Relief Society, as a companion body of the priesthood. Do you understand what Kimball just revealed? Many people since have argued that no, Joseph Smith did not give women the priesthood. He just allowed women to give prayers over the ox that the woman revived. If you're familiar with that Mormon pioneer story. You don't need to lay your hands upon an ox if you're just praying over it. She literally gave the ox a blessing. Romans 16 is where Jesus is revealed to have given women the priesthood as well. Phoebe is incorrectly translated as having been a servant. The Greek word is to be translated as deacon. And then Paul, who was not a quorum of the 12 apostle, he was a regular apostle, a separate organization of apostles. He, in Romans 16, recognized Jania as a fellow apostle like him. And so in Romans 16, women have the priesthood, and not only have the priesthood, but have priesthood offices as deacons and as apostles. This would have been organized by Jesus. And so when the church says that they have restored the same religion and organization that Jesus Christ had, that's what it's referring to, that women were given the priesthood by Joseph Smith. And thus, as I promised to talk about, Brigham Young took the priesthood away from women. He established polygamy, and then had everybody all of a sudden write their various views about Joseph Smith secretly practicing polygamy to justify Brigham Young doing it. And then Brigham Young gets divorced by one of his wives. And then afterward, he wrote the temple text in which the first covenant of the priesthood was that any woman who defies her husband, who does not obey her husband, as Brigham Young's wife did. Is that didn't or did? I can't remember the... He then ordered women to obey their husbands or kill themselves. A direct result of his wife humiliating him as the king of Deseret. So understand this, Mormons. The church hates women. They want women subjected to men. We see that the church gives women the priesthood when they get anointed as a Christ in the temple. That's what Christ means when translated. It means anointed. When you go through the temple, you become a Christ. The washing and anointings. And women, you know that women officiate in the priesthood when they give you the key names, signs, and tokens of the holy Melchizedek priesthood during the ceremony. Women cannot do that if they don't have priesthood. You have the priesthood. Joseph Smith gave it to you in 1842, on March 17th to be specific. He doesn't mention that date, but every woman knows it because every year the women celebrate it around the 17th. And so women are not allowed to take the priesthood out of the temple because women are not a companion body of the priesthood anymore. Women are subjected to their husbands. And with Nelson changing the temple text recently to have women covenant straight to God now, that destroys the family unit as the man presiding over the home, which President Benson changed obey to preside in the temples starting in 1991. And now, in case you haven't been watching my other videos, especially the conference of April last year, President Nelson has taken away the high priesthood from men. Let's go back to the temple again. What is it that you become in the temple? You are washed and anointed preparatory to you were washed preparatory to becoming anointed as a king and a priest. Is a priest of the Aaronic priesthood? No, obviously not. It's a priest of the Melchizedek priesthood, or in other words, a high priest. A high priest is necessary in order to enter the celestial kingdom. Section 76 of the Doctrine and Covenants, in case you don't know. And thus women were made queens and high priestesses. Women were given the priesthood. High priestesses in the temple, just as men were made high priests in the temple. But then in April 2018, Nelson took away men becoming high priests outside of the temple, doing exactly what the church has done through Brigham Young to women, keeping the priesthood within the temple and taking it away when they leave the temple. And as a result, the church now has a First Presidency message stating that no one should talk about what goes on in the temple. They're keeping you silent. They're keeping the priesthood in the temple. They're keeping the information in the temple in the temple. Mormons, you need to rise up and leave. It's that simple. If you're sticking to the church, if you don't like what I'm saying, if you don't like the evidence that the church themselves have designated that we've gone over here right now, then it is you who hate women. Even if you are a woman, you hate yourself. which I don't know if that may be worse than men hating women. So that's my video on the Equal Rights Amendment. The church does not want women to be equal. And he specifically worded it as his sexist remarks, though he claims to be a prophet of God who speaks the word of God to the people. I just exposed him as a fraud and a sexist. I just learned that the church had a gospel topic essay on women and the priesthood, so I thought we'd go over that here. I'm at the LDS.org site, topics, Joseph Smith's teachings about priesthood, temple, and women. So we're about to be exposed to major revelation here. Women and men enjoy many opportunities for service in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That means nothing when we're talking about priesthood authority, both within local congregations and churches and at a church-wide level. Among other things, LDS women preach sermons in Sunday meetings, which means they go against the teachings of Paul and the church's general conference. Women should keep silence in the church, according to Paul, or at least the author of Paul. Serve full-time proselyting missions, perform and officiate holy rites, in the temple, in the church's temples. And you guys do know about Hinckley getting up in priesthood and saying that women are not required to serve missions, that it's a man's job to serve missions. And then came out that his two granddaughters, both filed for their missions right after he gave that general conference talk. I believe Hinckley even talked about it in a later conference. And lead organizations that minister to families. Yeah, lead organizations. They're not talking about priesthood organizations, are they? Other women, to families, other women, young women, and children, but not over men. They participate in priesthood councils. Yeah, that was a recent change. Good thing you brought that up. At the local and general levels. Yeah, and recently at the higher levels with the pressure that ordained women put upon the church. Professional women teach Sunday school, history, and theology. Yeah, the church doesn't have theology at BYU. Don't fall for that tactic. Not a single member of the church is trained and educated in any kind of theology. Because only men are ordained to the priesthood office, since Brigham Young changed it, remember? Questions have arisen about women's standing in the church. This essay provides relevant historical context for these important questions. Okay, so we got to read more. I don't like how they do that. You can have the... Hello? There we go. They could have had this whole page available for us to read, rather than forcing us to click on the thing. The restoration of priesthood authority through the prophet Joseph Smith is fundamental doctrine of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons. Early in his ministry, Joseph Smith received priesthood authority from heavenly messengers. With that authority, he organized the church, conferred priesthood upon other men, and ordained them to offices in the priesthood. By this same authority, Joseph Smith organized the Relief Society, March 17th, 1842, as part of the structure of the church. which formally defined and authorized a major aspects of women's ministry as a companion body of the priesthood. Remember President Spencer W. Kimball's first presidency statement? All this was done to prepare the saints to participate in the ordinances of the temple. They're trying to word it to keep women in the temple, barefoot and pregnant, which were introduced soon after the founding of the Relief Society. At the time of his death, the revelatory vision imparted to Joseph Smith was securely in place. Women and men could receive and administer sacred priesthood ordinances in holy temples, but not out of the temple. Early Latter-day Saint understandings of the priesthood. The restoration of priesthood authority came at a time of intense religious excitement in the United States. This excitement was driven in part by questions about divine authority, who had it, how it was obtained, and whether it was necessary. In the early 19th century, most Christians believed that the authority to act in God's name had remained on the earth since Jesus' time. Joseph Smith taught that Christ's priesthood was lost after the deaths of the ancient prophets. They're leaving out information specifically to justify giving men the priesthood only. And let's see. The word priesthood was defined as the office or character of a priest and the order of men set apart for sacred offices. Well, yeah, because there was this fear-mongering of witchcraft still in the United States. And though we didn't burn witches at the stake, they were still prosecuted in the courts. And a witch is just someone who is a high priestess. Yep, here. Sorry, it's early in the morning still, although it's later in the morning. But as in most other Christian denominations during this era, Latter-day Saint men alone held priesthood offices, served formal proselytizing missions, and performed ordinances like baptism, blessing of the sacrament of the Lord's Supper. That's because it wasn't established until 1842. And then 2 years later, Joseph Smith was murdered. So it really didn't have much time to get going. And then more about men, keys to the Melchizedek priesthood, which I already did the video, many videos, about how the church doesn't have these keys after Joseph Smith died. This is just another one. Denying women the priesthood meant that they didn't have the keys. So women don't have it anyway, regardless of whether the church claims to have the keys and would give it to women. And more blah 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 about men. Okay. The culminating ordinances of the priesthood were to be found in the temple and would help prepare men and women to enter into God's presence. Boom! There it is. High priest is necessary to enter into God's presence. Right there. So what President Nelson did in April Conference 2018 to take away the high priesthood from elders and grandfathering out all the current high priests by downgrading them into the elders quorum was to take away the celestial kingdom status for members of the church. No more can members of the church enter into God's presence. It is necessary to be a high priest. You're reading it right here from LDS.org, from their gospel topic essays. Shall I read it again for you? The culminating ordinances of the priesthood were to be found in the temple, and would help prepare men and women to enter into God's presence. Again, the temple is where you get washed, preparatory to receiving your anointings as a king and queen, high priest and high priestess, in order to enter into God's presence. Nelson now keeps it in the temple, just like they've done since Brigham Young for women. It's kept in the temple, but it is denied out of the temple. And so, yes, women were allowed to go into God's presence by virtue of marriage. And yes, it's understandable, since the highest degree of the celestial kingdom, according to Mormon theology, is that a man and a woman are necessary to enter God's presence. You can't do it alone. But when you take away priesthood outside of the temple, that's suppression. Because the whole purpose is to be able to take that priesthood authority that you're given in the temple and use it in the world to bless the lives of others. See, here they're again distracting by saying that women in the early years participate actively in the religious community. They ratified decisions by voting in conferences. Voting in conferences? A sustaining is not a vote. Women have no vote in the church. Get that clear. The church has altered the definition of vote that Joseph Smith had in section 107. Or in other passages as well. We never have votes. People are appointed by the person who has the authority to do so, and everybody is supposed to sustain that vote, or that appointment. Aww, they decorated temples. Yay, that's a woman's job. And they worship alongside men. Oh, thank goodness they allow women to worship. And share the gospel. Oh, thank goodness. How generous the church is to women. And exercise spiritual gifts. Every early revelation authorized women to expound scripture. You're avoiding the laying on of hands. Joseph Smith and the Nauvoo Relay Society. Revelatory developments in Nauvoo afforded women new opportunities to participate in church and expanded Latter-day Saints' understanding of the eternal relationship between men and women. And then here they finally get to March 17th, 1842, wanting to provide charitable support to men. Oh, yeah, that's what it was all about. It had nothing to do with giving women priesthood authority equal to men. It was all about women being slaves, which they call being charitable, or charitable support. Yeah, way to go, guys. Women plan to form the society. When they presented their plan to Joseph Smith, he felt inspired to move beyond such precedents. Yeah, he gave them the priesthood. Something better. Yep. Here it is. The prophet told them he had something better for them, and said he would organize the women in the order of the priesthood after the pattern of the church. He gave women the priesthood. Again, another testament to Joseph Smith giving women the priesthood. And the women named it the Relief Society, rather than the Women's Order of the Priesthood, or some such like that. The Priesthood of Melchizedek would be the Hebrew version, although it's never been utilized on the records. It was unlike other women's societies because it was established by a prophet. Propaganda, come on. And official positions within the church structure of the church, not apart from it. Women were organized. Yeah, they were ordained according to the law of heaven. And then relieve the poor. Oh yeah, it's now, they're trying to make it sound like Joseph Smith delegated to taking care of the poor and the needy to the women, even though the men are the ones in charge of the bishop's storehouses. And then here's what Emma Smith is made the Relief Society president. Equal in authority to Joseph Smith as the president of the church. I don't think you guys understand this. She now has become queen of the church, the high priestess of the church. So when Joseph Smith died, the priesthood keys were with Emma Smith. She did not know this, and so when she died, the keys died with her. I now turn the key to you in the name of God, and this society shall rejoice, and knowledge and intelligence shall flow down from this time. There it is. Joseph Smith gave the key to Emma Smith. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was supposed to be keys and the transcriber made it a single key. And women expressed their sense of divine authorization. Feelings, nothing more than feelings. Designed to act in the name of the Lord. You don't do that unless you're a priesthood officer. Something extraordinary. Let's see. 2 aspects. Teachings to women. Joseph spoke of ordaining women and said that Relief Society officers would preside over the society. Yeah. As priestesses, high priestesses over the church. I now turn the key, I'm pretty sure it was keys, to you in the name of God. These statements indicate that Joseph Smith delegated priesthood authority to women in the Relief Society. They admit it. Joseph's language can be more fully understood in historical context. I don't need historical context here. Women were suppressed and were treated as slaves, and Joseph Smith freed women and gave them the priesthood. Then Brigham Young took it all away. Wait a minute, what's going on here? On these points, Joseph's actions illuminate the meaning of his words. Neither Joseph Smith nor any person acting on his behalf, nor any of his successors, you're talking about Brigham Young, who took it away, conferred the Aaronic or Melchizedek priesthood on women or ordained women to priesthood office. Oh my God! Oh my God! We just learned that Joseph Smith gave the keys of the priesthood to women. He initiated women as becoming high priestesses. Not just for the temple, but in an actual priesthood organization called the Relief Society. And now, the Gospel Topic Essays is saying that, no, what I just read to you was not true. Joseph Smith never did any of that. And that all of his successors did not. And that's true. Emma Smith didn't realize that she could do that. And as a result, the priesthood is now gone completely from the earth. Because Brigham Young was not legitimate either, and thus was not a successor. You're not a successor if you're not legitimate. Oh, man. This is just sickening. Oh, in later years, words like ordination and keys were more precisely defined by the illegitimate succession of Brigham Young's successor, John Taylor. See, now we're getting into irrelevant supporting information. John Taylor is not the legitimate successor. Therefore, anything he says about the matter is invalid. And I bet we're not going to get into any original documentation here. So, yeah. Alrighty. Yeah, here we go. During the 19th century, women frequently blessed the sick by the prayer of faith. And many women received priesthood blessings by men, such as the gift of healing through the prayer of faith. Man, why don't you just kick women in the crotch? And it only works for men, doesn't it? Well, no, my mom did scold me one time when there was an accident that occurred as a little kid with my sister involved, as she was threatening and getting physically violent with me. Alright. See again, Eliza R. Snow explained in 1883. That far too long after the original event. And then priesthood in the temple. And here's just excuses to keep the priesthood in the temple, that they can't take it out of the temple. So, May 1842, 2 months after women got the priesthood, the first temple endowments were performed, and marrying husband and wives together as kings and queens, priests, high priests and high priestesses. And notice that Joseph began sealing or initiating women into the endowment. So he didn't fully grasp what he needed to do. As the leader of the church, he took it upon himself to do all the temple work. As the church would have gotten bigger under Joseph Smith, he would have had to delegate. And one would hope he would have had the insight to say, you know what, maybe women should be doing this, which is what Brigham Young established, but he kept women in the temple and would not let them take the priesthood out of the temple. Order of the priesthood. Yeah. See, here they talk about the temple ordinances in December 1845. This is after Joseph Smith is dead. Alright. Temple ordinances were priesthood ordinances. Yeah, but they did not bestow ecclesiastical office. What was the Relay Society then? Oh my God. They fulfilled the Lord's promise, and down from on high, priesthood power, and blah, 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 blah. Man. They would be ripped apart in a court of law if they were trying to present this as their argument. All propaganda. It prepared endowed members to go forth armed with God's power as priesthood holders. Sealed. Without the females, all things cannot be restored. Propaganda, 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 propaganda. Women in priesthood today. And I'm not going to go over it. We're already in an hour on this video already. So I took longer than I wanted. Alrighty. Men and women continue to officiate in sacred ordinances in temples, as they did in Joseph Smith's day. But they don't have office anymore, as in Joseph Smith's day. The priesthood authority exercised by Latter-day Saint women in the temple and elsewhere? What? Elsewhere? What priesthood authority elsewhere? You just said that it belongs within the temple. What do you mean by elsewhere? It's unrecognized by people inside the church as well. And misunderstood and overlooked by those with it. You just told us women do not get the priesthood authority. Unbelievable. Alright, today women are suppressed. We let them wear slacks on their missions. Can't you just leave us alone? Priesthood defines, empowers, ennobles, and creates order. So why are you denying it to women? Unbelievable. The hatred, the sexism that permeates the leaders of the church who just don't get it. They want their way, and otherwise it's the highway. Alright, so now we're finished.